Shaykh for Rosh Hashiva for having me. It's a little weird game about the terror, such a cold terror. It's a beautiful thing, but just want to. Normally, when I speak, I have PowerPoints behind me and these other things. So visual aids. Feel free to we can schmooze afterwards about what I do. I'm in the healthcare field, but feel free if anybody has any questions about that. I'd be more than happy to discuss it. One of the interesting things that happened this week was we had a presidential election, and I think this presidential election was a little different than probably most in the sense that you have a president that came in who's a little more assertive, a little more overreaching, if you will. And the questions that were spoken about is how does halacha view it? There's all sorts of things when it comes to halachas of malachim. Does that pertain to nowadays? Does that pertain to, and if it does, to what degree? So the question we actually had was an attorney general after the president came in and he started signing, I think it was 27 executive orders. He said, he's a president, he's not the king. So the question really is that taka true or is that not true? So the shaila really is, what is a king? So if we look in the Torah, in Parak Yud Zayin, Pasuk Yud Daled, steht, Kisova yal haaretz asher Hashem lekecha noisein loch v'rishta v'shavta bo v'yamarta asima olay melech kechol hagoyim asher tzivivosai. It says when the Yidden are going to come into Eretz Yisrael, they're going to look around, they're going to see that the countries all around them, the Goyim have kings, and they say, we want the same thing, we want this. So Hashem says, Soim tasim olech hamelech asher yivchar Hashem lekecha boy mikar v'achecha tasim olech hamelech leisucha loseis olech ish nokri asher leyachicha hu. Right, and then it goes on to say what the king is allowed to do, what the king is not allowed to do, with that all sorts of things that you shouldn't have too many susim, wives, all that restrictions. So the question also is having a king, is that a ma'ila, is that a chasarn? So l'kuli alam moeded that it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. The shaila is it a b'diavad? Is it a l'chatchila? So there's a three-way machlokes with regard to that. We have a shita that says that it's mamish l'chatchila. The Rambam says that this is how it's supposed to be. You have the Barbanel that says l'chatchila not. It was just that you didn't ask for it. Really, it should be done the shaytim, how it started off with judges. And then you have a middle shita that says somewhere in between of l'chatchila and b'diavad. But what do we see from here? We see that there is this musig of a king. That's by a Yiddish king. What are the laws of a Yiddish king? The laws of a Yiddish king is that how does a Yiddish king come back? It's either through Hashem, which is through a Navi, or through a Bezdin, for those that learned Daf Yomi, that was a few days ago through a Bezdin of Ayin Aleph. 71 come together and they say, you are the king. What does he have to do? He has absolute authority. Within Torah law, obviously, within the confines of Torah law, he has absolute authority. And the third thing that applies to a king is a very interesting halacha, is that he carries an extra Sefer Torah. Normally, there's a mitzvah on every Yid to write one Sefer Torah. A king has to have two Sefer Torahs. What's the reason for this? The reason is there's a certain duality, so to speak, when it comes to a king, that he has to balance the awesomeness of being a king, that he has people that he has to show that ich bin the king, ich bin the melech, right? But he also has to show that at the end of the day I'm a basar b'dam and I have to answer to the melech malchei hamlach, and that's what I have to answer. So this one Torah represents the pnimius, one Torah represents the chitzonius, and you find that also that by David, when he gave over the malchus to Shlomo, he gave it over. He had a mule. What's a mule? A mule is a combination of a horse and a donkey, right? A horse is when the kings of the Goyim would go around. They would go around with horses, right? That represents kashivas. A donkey represents the lowest end. So David had a mule to show over here and over here. He had to represent both. Masha'en came a Goyish king, which again there is Malchus, because if you look at the in the Gemara that brings down, which we're going to say, the Torah recognizes a Melech of the Umas Island, right? But there's different halachas as far as that goes, and really, what's the Melech of by an Umas Island? What does the Melech have to have? He has to have the absolute power. He has to have the power to do anything he wants. He has to have uncontested rule, meaning if, let's say, he comes in and says, the sky is green, everyone has to be minded the sky is green. He could also say that everyone has to respect him. And the Magen Avraham says, he distills it to one very specific insight. What is that? That he has the ability to kill whoever he wants, and he has the ability that anybody who's supposed to die, he could live. Could say he lives, he lives. I mean, he could walk into a room full of people, says everybody here dies, everybody has to die. That's the Azoi Zok Magen Avraham. Well, the Maisa Geret is the nafkamina between whether or not it's a Yiddish king, a Goyish king. What's the nafkaminas? So the Gemara in Brachos, Daf Nun Ches Amud Aleph, says as follows: Haroy Malchei Yisrael, Omer Baruch Shecholak Mikvoidei L'Reya. He says a bracha, Baruch Shecholak Mikvoidei L'Reya, that Hashem gave part of His kavod to this king. And if somebody this is Haroy, this is the 9th parak of brachas, which talks about if somebody sees things, he makes brachas on them. So there's all sorts of brachas, a laundry list of brachas that somebody could make. And what happens if he sees Malchei Oivei Kacham? He says, Baruch Shenosa Michvoidoi L'Briyosa. Baruch that Hashem gave His kavod to the Briyosa. And then Rav Yochanan goes on and says, that somebody should what? He should run after Oivei Chacham, Shem Yizakeh, Yavchem Bei Malchei Yisrael, Malchei Oivei Chacham. You can see, someone should actually run to see a Malchei Oivei Yisrael to Malchei Oivei Chacham. Now, taking this back to what we started off with is, nowadays, does a president, a governor, do they have a din of the melech or not? So Pashtus, none of them, Zikr, not the president of the United States, rises to the level of being able to kill anybody who he wants. So Chayra, they don't have this, but there is a three-way machlokes as to do you make a bracha or not when you see a president. So you have Rav Moshe who says that you do not make a bracha. You have Rav Elyashiv who says you make a bracha without the Shem Hashem, and then you have a few others which is a muted that says you make a full bracha because it was lav dafka, this thing that says that you could kill somebody, but you could still make a bracha legam. And there's various different mises throughout history. When people went to Napoleon, they made a bracha. I don't know, but l'chayra, somebody like Putin you would make a bracha legam. I would think. You know what I'm saying? Somebody disagrees with them. Normally they find themselves outside of a 7-story window. So l'chayra, it could be said that you could, according to Al Shidduch, you could make a bracha according to this. Now, as far as Malchus goes, and what we have over here, when we look in the Torah, it says Ish Matzliach. It calls one person somebody who's an Ish Matzliach. Who's that person? That person is Yosef, right? When you think about somebody who's Matzliach, somebody who is the semel of Hatzlacha, who's a poster child for Hatzlacha, you wouldn't necessarily think about somebody who was kicked out of his family house, spent time in a pit, was in the base house room, got into a fight with, the person that he was serving. Mamash went through trials and tribulations like nobody else. When the only time the Torah calls, there's a lot of options for the Torah to call somebody an Ish Matzliach. And it called this to Yosef. What's the Vart? The Vart is we have, and I was just right before here, I was actually by the Sas of Rebbe, and I told him that I was coming here, and he said, do me a favor, tell him over this Vart. He said that we have over here, we have a parallel. We have Malchus and Torah, which Yosef was probably the closest thing to a Goyish Melech that any Yid has ever come to, right? And then you have Paroi, who dominates the next few parishes, side by side. but you couldn't have more polar opposites. You have Yosef, who was a shoylet on everything. Yosef represents, he was everything, right? He was somebody who, when it says that Yosef, when it says that Layodas Yosef, what's mean Layodas Yosef? Yeah, Layodas Yosef. But he didn't know what Yosef stood for. Yosef realized that he had a Keser way before he had the actual Keser Malchus. And it was that Keser Malchus, it was that Keser that he had before the Keser Malchus that was able to say, you know what, I have trials and tribulations, but guess what? This is exactly what I was supposed to have. And Memela, that got him through it. When somebody knows that they have a Keser sitting on their head, they could get through any trial and tribulations. Zokter Torah, that is a Melech. A Melech is somebody that anything that's thrown at me, I can deal with because I know that this is something that is supposed to come at me. Pari, what happens to Pari? Pari says, you know, oh, this is what we have the stargazers that tell me something, throw everybody into the water, right? He looks at it in a certain way that it can't be that it's me. It has to be that it's somebody else. That is somebody who's not Shiloh. That is somebody who is a Goyish king. Who, what's the one thing by a Goyish king? He's up to Magen Avram, that he could kill anybody. That is the exact contrast between a Goyish king and a Yiddish king. And that's why Yosef was somebody who was an Ish Matzliach. I know personally, I'm in the healthcare field, and you know, one of the things that, and I had the source to be able to train a lot of guys that were starting out, and one thing that was impressed on me when I was trained by somebody else is that it's possible to be in the workplace, and it's also possible to be an Ish Matzliach. And it's possible to really follow everything. It's very tempting to have shortcuts. Something that I know personally from my side is that we do a lot with not-for-profits. We do with, you know, whether it's religious organizations, counties, and recently I had a Maisa where I was working on trying to get something. I had a meeting set up. I was coming down with 5 people. We were meeting with probably 7 or 8 other people. And the day before the meeting, they call me up and they say, we can't have a meeting. I said, what's going on? I called up the person that would set up the meeting, and I said, what's going on here? He said that that you already came to this building, you didn't tell them that was you, you took your yarmulke off, you went into the building, you toured it, and they thought that you just wanted to get a quick look at the building, and they realized that you're not legit, and they want to stop it. I said, I never was in this building. I was actually, I don't recall ever being, I'm saying within 30 miles of this place. What's going on? He said, you know what? We're going to have a meeting one-on-one. You come down with one person talking out. If everything works out, you could go to the next one. I said, fine. We came down there. They said, does this person work for you? I said, no. They said, does this person work for you? I said, yes. Somebody by someone's name. I showed them a picture. They said, no, that's not the person. The Maisa came out, it was never us, it was never this, and then we made up to have another meeting. The bottom line is, shortcuts are exactly that. It's something that we find is, the bottom line is it's a long game, and it's possible to be an Ish Matzliach by doing the right thing. Shkoyach. Any questions? What's that? Yeah. No, you gotta have to